Debra Winger, one of the brightest stars of the 1980s, chose to disappear at the very moment the spotlight shone on her the most. When the Oscar nominations kept coming, when the press called her the next Meryl Streep, when millions of viewers were captivated by those powerful yet vulnerable eyes of hers, Debra suddenly walked away from Hollywood without a single explanation. No scandal, no controversy, just a silence that left the entire film industry confused. What could make such an extraordinary talent step down from the peak at the most glorious moment of her career? Was it the grinding pressure of an unforgiving industry, the inner battles no audience ever saw, or a deep exhaustion with a world where everything had to be performed, even emotions? The story of Debra Winger is not merely about fame and loss. It is the journey of a woman who dared to hold on to herself, even when that meant walking away from everything. Debra Winger was born on May 16, 1955, in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, into a Jewish family with a strong educational background. Her mother was a teacher, her father ran a small store, and from a very early age, Debra was already different. A quiet observer, always curious about the emotions adults tried to hide. Her childhood was not dramatic, but it left deep marks. A sensitive mind, an easily wounded heart, and an uncanny ability to see through people. Qualities that would later shape her into an actress of remarkable depth. But the true turning point came when she was still very young. During a trip to Israel, Debra suffered a severe accident. Head trauma, internal bleeding, and nerve damage. Doctors warned she might never walk normally again and might even lose her sight. Months of lying motionless in a hospital bed completely changed her life. Debra once shared, "If I get to live, I don't want to live the way I used to anymore." When she recovered, almost miraculously, she carried with her something many actors spend a lifetime searching for: a profound awareness of life's fragility and a fierce desire to live truthfully, without pretending, without compromising, without bowing to any system. That accident explains why Debra Winger later became someone unafraid of risk, unafraid to speak the truth, unafraid of being disliked. And it also explains why, at the very height of her career, she could walk away from Hollywood without ever looking back. After recovering from the accident, Debra Winger did not return to school, nor did she seek a stable job as many expected. She chose a path no one in her family had ever imagined for her: acting. Not because of glamorous dreams, but because she felt that acting was the only thing that allowed her to fully express the emotions she had been forced to suppress during her long months in the hospital. Debra's early days were anything but easy. She worked various small jobs on film sets, then took on tiny roles, often with no lines at all. Yet even in those insignificant parts, Debra radiated an unusual kind of energy. Wild, instinctive, and untouched by Hollywood's rigid expectations. Her real opportunity came when she was cast as Wonder Girl in the Wonder Woman series. Although it was only a supporting role, it made Hollywood take notice of her. This young woman with sharp eyes, a strong voice, and a presence completely unlike any of the traditional beauties of the 1970s. From here, the flame began to rise. Debra did not try to become a star. She only wanted to touch the truth within every character. And it was precisely that attitude, a style of acting that was instinctive, raw, unafraid of looking imperfect, unafraid of revealing real emotions, that made directors start paying attention. At this stage, Hollywood was still hesitant about her. A clear talent, but too strong-willed, too independent, too unpredictable. But that very difference was about to lead Debra Winger to the role that would ignite her name. Urban Cowboy, opening the golden era no one could have foreseen. The biggest breakthrough in Debra Winger's career came in 1980, when she appeared in Urban Cowboy alongside John Travolta. The film was not only a major success, but also introduced Hollywood to something audiences had never seen in any young actress of that era. An energy that was both tough and fragile, powerful, yet deeply vulnerable. Debra didn't act the way other stars did. She lived inside every scene, as if the character had stepped directly out of her own experiences. 2 years later, Debra entered her golden period when she played Paula Pokrivki in An Officer and a Gentleman. The film became a global phenomenon, and the role earned her her first Oscar nomination. Audiences didn't love Debra for a perfectly cinematic beauty. They loved her for the absolute authenticity in every glance, every line she delivered. She made people believe in her characters by revealing the most fragile parts of herself. Immediately after that, Debra shook Hollywood again with Terms of Endearment, 1983, the Oscar-winning film that earned her a second Academy Award nomination. Her portrayal of a young woman fighting a terminal illness became one of the most profound performances of the decade. Debra didn't act pain, she lived it. And it was that raw aliveness that made it impossible for viewers to look away. Throughout the 1980s, every major director wanted to work with Debra Winger. She became the embodiment of a kind of acting that was untamable, free, instinctive, sometimes chaotic, yet always brutally honest. The 1990s continued to mark her legacy with Shadowlands, 1993, the film that earned her a third Oscar nomination, a rare feat for someone not yet 40. It was considered her most fully realized performance, gentle, contemplative, and deeply intelligent, proving she was not just a youthful phenomenon but a masterful artist. But in this very era of triumph, something else began to take shape within Debra. A growing sense of alienation from the spotlight, a fatigue with Hollywood's invisible rules, and an intuition that the brighter the stardom, the higher the price one must pay. The peak had arrived, and the quiet storm behind it was beginning to form. At the height of her fame, Debra Winger possessed everything Hollywood admired: talent, beauty, and 3 consecutive Oscar nominations. Yet behind that brilliance was a silent battle that almost no one could see. Her first marriage to actor Timothy Hutton, one of the most promising young stars of that era, seemed like a perfect match. 2 artistic souls, 2 intelligent and sensitive individuals. But that very sensitivity made everything fragile. Debra loved intensely, but she also demanded absolute honesty, something the entertainment industry does not always allow. Work pressure, relentless shooting schedules, emotional distance, and differences in temperament caused the marriage to crack quickly. In 1990, they divorced, leaving in Debra a deep emptiness that was difficult to fill. But the quiet storm did not come from love alone. It came from the very environment Debra was living in. She had always been outspoken, never hiding her emotions, never accepting the absurdities of a system everyone else simply called Hollywood's unwritten rules. This caused Debra to constantly clash with producers, directors, and even co-stars. Some stories were exaggerated by the media, others were whispered behind closed doors, but all of them etched the same label onto her image: difficult. But what lay behind those rumors? a woman who refused to let herself be controlled, an actress who would not accept being treated as a ready-made beauty, and a sensitive soul who could not endure prolonged pretenses. Debra began to feel suffocated. Every new success brought a heavier layer of pressure. Every stronger performance made the world expect even more of her. And every time she stepped onto a red carpet, she felt increasingly alienated from the very place that once celebrated her. In the few interviews she gave later, Debra admitted, "Success didn't make me happy. It made me feel like I was being swallowed whole. A broken marriage, fame that brought loneliness, a system growing more toxic, and a wearying emotional landscape. The quiet storm was rising, and it would lead Debra to a decision no one could have imagined: leaving Hollywood at the very moment she stood on its peak." Debra Winger's collapse was not a loud scandal, nor was it a long downward spiral like many other stars experienced. It was quiet, subtle, yet incredibly heavy. It began with small tirednesses, then slowly grew into a restlessness she could no longer ignore. At that time, Hollywood was entering a phase where women over 40 were considered past their expiration date. The scripts sent to Debra all started looking the same: the wounded wife, the grieving mother, the woman dependent on a man. No one was offering her the complex, sharp, powerful roles she once had in Urban Cowboy or Shadowlands. Debra felt boxed in, reduced, trapped inside a world she no longer recognized, and with her strong, independent, uncompromising nature, she refused to accept that. Meanwhile, backstage conflicts grew larger. Producers wanted her to follow the rules. Directors wanted her to be softer, more agreeable. The media exaggerated minor issues into evidence that Debra was difficult. She became an easy target for every rumor. And then, in the midst of that invisible chaos, Debra made a decision no one could believe. She left Hollywood. Not because she failed, not because she was washed up. She left because she no longer recognized herself in that world. In a later interview, Debra said, "Hollywood wanted me to become something I wasn't. I chose to leave before I lost myself." Her disappearance became one of the greatest mysteries of the 1990s. One day, Debra was still attending film premieres, appearing on nomination lists, and standing under constant flashes of cameras. The next day, she was gone. No public appearances, no interviews, no new roles, no explanation. Hollywood was shocked. Audiences were confused. The press came up with every possible theory, from a volatile personality to behind-the-scenes conflicts. But the truth was far simpler and far more painful. Debra was tired. Tired of the pretense. Tired of repetitive roles. Tired of having to fight every single day just to be herself. Her collapse was not a fall. It was an escape. And that decision, both courageous and deeply wounded, led Debra Winger into a long period of silence. A period where she had to confront the deepest scars of her soul. When Debra Winger left Hollywood, the first thing that surrounded her was not regret, but a strange, unfamiliar silence. For years, she had lived within the harsh rhythm of fame, always having to show up, always having to be strong, always carrying the expectations of others. When all of that suddenly stopped, Debra found herself standing in a quiet world so still that she felt as though she had fallen out of reality. The work calls slowed. There were no more meetings, no more exhausting shooting schedules, no more eyes scrutinizing her every gesture or emotion. At first, that silence confused her, but the longer she stayed within it, the more she realized it was something she had never truly touched before, a space that demanded nothing from her, that asked her to prove nothing at all. In that wide, peaceful silence, Debra began turning inward. She read more, wrote more, and listened to the parts of her soul that had been abandoned amid Hollywood's noise. Slowly, she realized she had never really had time to know who she was when she wasn't in front of a camera. And this pause, this unexpected stillness, gave her the chance to discover that for the very first time. It was during this journey of rediscovery that Debra met Arliss Howard. Not a whirlwind romance, not a glamorous Hollywood match, but a quiet connection. Two people finding each other at the exact moment they were both learning to live slower, to live truthfully. With Arliss, Debra didn't need to be a star. She didn't need to be perfect. She only needed to be herself. As they built a home together, Debra stepped into a chapter she had never known before. A life without noise, without pressure, where mornings began not with production schedules, but with the laughter of children. And that simplicity, something she never imagined she would long for in earlier years, became the most powerful medicine of all. The longer she lived in this quiet rhythm, the more she felt her old wounds closing, not disappearing, but softening, becoming a part of her in a gentler way. The expectations that once weighed heavily on her shoulders were gone. The loneliness that had followed her throughout her years of fame slowly faded. Debra began to understand that healing doesn't always come from standing up quickly after a fall, but from giving yourself permission to stop and breathe, to step away from the spotlight, to choose a life where the heart can be at peace again. That was Debra Winger's chapter of healing, a chapter without noise, without glamour, but so deep and so real that only those who have once lost themselves can fully understand it. As the quiet years slowly reshaped Debra Winger's life, something unexpected happened. She began to miss cinema. Not the fame, not the public attention, but the feeling of living inside a character, of digging into the hidden corners of human nature, the one thing Hollywood could never take away from her. But this time, Debra did not return as a star trying to reclaim her peak. She returned as a mature woman, calm, grounded, fully aware of what brought peace to her soul and what caused it pain. She chose small projects, independent films, roles that didn't chase the market, but contained exactly what Debra had always sought: truth. Works like Rachel Getting Married, The Lovers, and later Kajillionaire. Films that weren't loud or flashy, but were enough to show that the artistic flame within her had never gone out. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to be lit again. The most striking thing about Debra's return was her attitude. No rush, no pressure, no need to prove anything. If a role felt right, she accepted it. If not, she was content to turn it down and return to her family life, the place where she had found a peace Hollywood could never offer. Debra understood clearly. This comeback was not about reclaiming glory. It was about reclaiming herself in the craft of acting. And through this quiet return, audiences realized something. Debra Winger had never truly disappeared. She had only changed the way she showed up, from a star seen by millions to an artist devoted to the project she loved, and to those who understood the value of being real on screen. Her rebirth was not a grand explosion. It was a small lamp lit in the night, bright enough to show the way, and warm enough to remind her that she had finally returned in the way her soul needed. Today, When people speak of Debra Winger, they don't only recall the classic films of the 1980s or the 3 Oscar nominations that defined her reputation. What makes Debra a truly distinctive icon is the way she exists in the history of cinema. Not loudly, not by chasing power, but through a rare and unwavering authenticity. Her greatest legacy is perhaps not the number of films she made, but the quality of every role she embodied. She brought to the screen a type of character that was different. Women who were imperfect, not sweetened, but real, strong, layered with cracks and complexities in which audiences saw pieces of themselves. Debra paved the way for a new generation of actresses, from Maggie Gyllenhaal and Michelle Williams to Anne Hathaway. Women who found the courage to break the narrow mold Hollywood had long imposed on female characters. Her influence extends beyond acting. It lies in her choices as well, stepping away from the spotlight when it no longer aligned with her soul. Debra showed that a career does not always have to follow a straight line, and success is not measured solely by the number of roles or awards. Sometimes, success is knowing when to stop and when to return to what matters most: yourself. In an industry accustomed to turning people into symbols, Debra chose to be a person first, an artist second. And that choice made her a unique model, an actress who dared to keep her authenticity, who dared to sacrifice the spotlight to protect the voice within. The legacy of Debra Winger reminds us that art is only beautiful when it is truthful, and sometimes a step away from the light echoes far longer than a hurried step toward it. When looking back at Debra Winger's journey, we don't just see a star who once stood at the very top of Hollywood. We see a woman who lived wholeheartedly with every choice she made. The choices the world couldn't understand, and the ones only her heart knew the true value of. Debra was never the kind of star who chased the spotlight. She came to the craft because she wanted to touch the truth of human nature, and she walked away from it when it no longer offered her that truth. She loved her roles by giving them everything she had, and when the wounds grew too deep, she stepped back to find the peace that fame could never give her. Debra Winger's life reminds us that sometimes courage isn't about standing under the lights. It's about daring to step out of them, daring to face the silence, daring to rediscover yourself in a world that constantly tries to define you as something you are not. She never disappeared. She simply changed the way she existed, quieter, calmer, yet far more profound. And at the end of her story, Debra leaves us with a question each of us must answer for ourselves. If the brightest spotlight of your life began to burn away who you truly are, would you have the courage to walk away from it? If Debra Winger's story touched you in a personal way, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy deep, emotional life journeys like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next stories.